I need to rip up the script here. Ed Morris of Citigroup speaks of $20 oil. What would $20 oil do to your Saudi Arabia?
Well, first of all, thank you. I don't think we're going to see $20 oil, but of course it won't be good news. But it all depends for how long will oil stay at 20, if at all. So I think over the next 3 to 4 years, Saudi Arabia will be fine with oil at 20. Again, I don't see it there. I see it more in the 60s range rather than 20s.
Right. John, you are in Dubai with the financial center behind us from our Middle East headquarters in Dubai. There's an interesting relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. How will that relationship develop, not only with King Salman, but with the grandchildren of Abdul Aziz?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a historic relationship between the two countries. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have worked together, especially after the Arab Spring, to help, for instance, Egypt, to help Bahrain, to give a lot of assistance to these countries. More than $25 billion has been given to Egypt over the last few years, and $10 billion committed to Bahrain and another 10 to Oman. So they have important relations, these two countries.
John, we're all trying to understand the Saudis' motivation in not cutting production at the last OPEC meeting this past fall. Do you feel that it was, as the conventional wisdom now is, to put U.S. shale producers out of business, or to some extent was it also to contain Iran?
Yeah, I think that this is happening as a result of Saudi Arabia's commitment and belief that they need to go after market share. Now, of course, global markets believe that the Saudis are doing this to hit on Iran. And I would remind people that during the Iran-Iraq war, oil went down substantially within 3 years, from 85 to 88, and the Iranians kept on fighting Iraq. And what made Iran sign an agreement was the use of chemical weapons by Saddam Hussein. So I don't think this is the right strategy, nor do I think that Saudi is doing it in order to force Iran or even Russia to comply and make them be part of a happier family.
John, we have a question for you from Jason Trennert. He's here with strategic research here in the studio with us.
Sir, I would just ask you, who do you think is the marginal producer now? Who's the swing producer? Is it the U.S. or is it Saudi Arabia?
I think the marginal producer continues to be Saudi Arabia because they have the extra capacity. Of course, nobody talks about the ability of Saudi Arabia to have 2 or 2.5 million barrels of extra capacity. Definitely, it is still Saudi Arabia, but the U.S. is very important, no doubt. And I think the floor in oil prices is now at $45. It's not going to be 20. So we've seen the 45, the marginal producer still being Saudi Arabia. Remember that for Saudi, the cost of production is in the single dollar digit. So if there is a concern, Saudi Arabia can still see oil at much lower prices and still make money.
John, what about what is going on domestically in Saudi Arabia? There are these multi-billion-dollar mega cities going up in the desert. I have a friend who's an architect at Harvard who's actually working on one of them. If oil stays at $50 a barrel, are they going to be forced to scrap some of these enormous spending projects? What are the prospects for economic reform?
Well, I believe that, you know, what we've seen, the announcements, the $32 billion worth of, let's say, handouts and pensions and extra salaries that the king announced, King Salman, is part of this attempt to keep everybody within line and also to show the benevolence of the new king. I think it's very important. And Saudi Arabia has done it in the past. Remember when King Abdullah became king in 2005, he increased public sector salaries by 15%. So this is not new, but of course the amount is quite substantial.
John, there's long been talk of Saudi Arabia rebalancing its economy away from oil and into other sectors. Was that always window dressing, or will that still happen?
Well, you know, this is an ongoing attempt. Saudi Arabia needs to continue to diversify. Unfortunately, diversification is difficult. Saudi Arabia still relies on oil. 90% of oil exports come from oil.